I'm Anita Dockley. I am the co-director of Justice Futures. Today, we will be exploring the findings and approaches used in this partnership project between Justice Futures and UCL's Centre for Education and Criminal Justice. The project's focus was to reimagine and hopefully signal the transformative possibilities in the relationships, practices, and potential for further education and the justice system. I'd like to tell you a little bit about Justice Futures. Justice Futures was established as a community interest company about 18 months ago. There are two co-directors, me and Gemma Buckland. It's just us, but every project we do, we work alongside our associates, people with lived and learned experience of the criminal justice system. For this project, we were lucky enough to have Kieron and Bryan work alongside us. He will be speaking later in the event. Much of our practice in the past has been around criminal justice, but our ambition is to work across the criminal, civil, and social justice sectors and systems. We use transformative practices, by which we mean systems thinking, participatory, creative, and futures practice, which are blended with traditional social science methods to open up new possibilities for change. Our approach is to generate and test ideas based on a deeper understanding of what we are wanting to change and also what mechanisms we can use to do so. We are looking to grow understanding, grow capacity, and grow movement so that we can build the justice systems of tomorrow, today. Hence, in our logo, the seeing, thinking, and doing differently. Our logo also shows and highlights the word us, because we believe the transformative change we are looking for means all of us need to be involved. Enough about Justice Futures. Let's think about today's event. Shortly, we will be hearing from my colleague, Nina Champion, who will present the project findings and the approach we took to how we work together to co-produce these ideas. Then we will be speaking with and asking people to speak about their experiences. So people who have worked alongside us and participated in the project, to see what their reflections and ideas are about the things we've been saying. This section will be led by Kieron. And then it's over to you, and we would like to hear from you all about what you have been thinking and any questions you might have as a result of this. First, I need to say some thank yous before we move on. Our first thank you goes to our funder, the UCL Grand Challenge of Justice and Equality Initiative. Then the project steering group, all of whom are here with us today. John Vorhaus and Kerry Wong from UCL. John Collins, the CEO of Prisoners of Education Trust. Tom Schuller, Chair of the Prisoner Learning Alliance, and of course, Kieron Bryan. I'd also like to thank Nina Champion for all her hard work and energy in shaping, delivering, and pulling together this project. And a final thank you goes to Erika Flowers, the wonderful artist who created this magnificent artwork that translates or maps the project findings. She will tell you more about this a little bit later. So, final reminders. Please mute when you're not speaking. Please take your cameras off when you are not contributing, but please have them on during the discussion because it will make for a better dialogue. And remember, we're recording this event. Please put any comments throughout the event in the chat on any questions so we can build them into the discussion later. And the last one you can all laugh at. Message me about any tech issues. I will do my best. You can see it's not my forte. We are also looking, and we need to talk about this being a safe space. There may be elements in this event that possibly ask you to dig under the surface of the assumptions you and others might be making about change. There may be new ways of seeing, thinking, and doing change that might be introduced that challenge how you currently work. Our aim is to ensure that you feel as safe as possible and can both ask questions and question our perspectives and those expressed by others. Please be aware of how we can all impact and affect others. So, to move to the main event, I'd like to introduce you to Nina Champion. Until recently, she was part of the Justice Futures team. She is a stalwart of the criminal justice voluntary sector, having worked in so many different ways to promote, reform, change and innovate, not least as Director of Criminal Justice Alliance and at Prisoners Education Trust. Now she is embarking on a new challenge, a PhD at Greenwich University. Nina, welcome. The floor is yours. I'll stop sharing and let's move on as quickly as we can.
Thanks, Anita.
Hopefully now you can share. Yeah.
Can you see that, Anita? Is that sharing?
You can
Okay.
see it, but you need to start. That's it. That's brilliant.
Yeah, brilliant, lovely. Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us over your lunchtime. So, as Anita said, this was a long piece of work that we were doing earlier this year. So this presentation is just going to give you some of the highlights. So I really encourage you to read the final report, to see the detail, but also to see the beautiful illustrations that Erika Flowers did and give them justice. And I know she's going to talk a bit about them later. And just as a little bit of background as well, this discussion about the connection between further education and the justice system actually arose from a conference that the Centre for Education and Criminal Justice at UCL put on last year, which I went to, which some key themes arose from, which led us to applying for this funding pot. And those themes were around that kind of fragile transition from prison to community, the lack of opportunities to study either post-release or while you're on probation doing a community sentence, the limited access to level 3 qualifications. So those are sort of above GCSE level qualifications. But what came out of the conference, which was really interesting, was this idea of a potential solution, the untapped resource of FE colleges, which are obviously a resource nationwide in most local communities, and yet is really untapped in terms of supporting people on probation or leaving prison. So that was really the background that we wanted to explore more with this project. And this was a quote from one of the surveys that we did as part of this project. And I think it really helps to succinctly kind of talk about the problem that we're trying to solve here. So they said, I've been in the sector for over 30 years, but I've not seen a thorough pipeline that meets the needs of people leaving prison or on probation to be referred to FE for skills development and preparation for employment. So, we've heard about pipelines that go from school to prison, but what about these pipelines from prison or probation into education, training and employment, in particular, further education? So interestingly, in doing some initial kind of research, at the start of this project, I came across a green paper from 2005, so 20 years ago. And in this green paper, it had a vision, really, for quite radical change about these pipelines to education, training and employment, and envisioned collaboration between prisons, probation services, charities, FE colleges, universities and employers to really kind of create sustainable pathways for people into careers, not just jobs. But unfortunately, as many of you who work in the sector will know, that that vision hasn't come to pass. And actually the links, particularly in England, between prisons and FE colleges have actually weakened during that time. So back in 2005, there were 14 FE colleges that provided education in prisons. And as some of you will know, in just this month, the new education contracts have started, which have just 3 providers covering very large geographic areas. And some of you will also be aware that there was a report published this week by the Inspectorate for Prisons called Passing Time, which was the description of how work and education in prisons is currently seen. And we know that there are huge issues in terms of the funding that the Education Select Committee have talked about, the continual decline in funding. And John from PT, I know, has been blogging about this a lot recently to really highlight those budget cuts as the prison population goes up. The amount of budget for prison education has gone down. And just to highlight as well that the Chief Inspector of Probation in the report this year also highlighted that with unpaid work community sentences, there's supposed to be 30% of the time is supposed to be spent on education, training, employment, but only 1 in 10 participants are reaching that 30%. So this is an area with huge potential for growth, and we think that FE colleges could play a really important part in solving some of these problems. We focused on 3 areas in particular. So we know that obviously sectors like construction and logistics and hospitality, they often kind of dominate, prison and probation employment opportunities, which is fantastic. And there are some really good FE prison and probation partnerships focused on these sectors, which we can learn from. But we wanted to take quite a little bit of a different tack and look at 3 sectors that are underexplored, but we think have high potential. So that's sports and fitness industry, the arts and kind of creative industries, and like the digital and tech industries. We've got some speakers later who are going to talk more in depth about those sectors. But just to say that the reason why we chose these is because they're popular. They are often a hook for change. They're engaging. They're things that people are interested to get involved with. So provide a real good kind of starting point for getting back into education and training and employment. But also that these areas have, good wide-ranging employment opportunities. So the creative industries, for example, has grown 30% since 2011, with the demand projected to rise by 30 to 40%. So, and we think about sport, it's not just that kind of coaching or personal training, it's about nutrition and management and the technological changes within sports. With digital, obviously, we've got, cybersecurity, AI, e-commerce, coding, digital design. There's huge amounts of different wide-ranging career opportunities within these sectors, and we think they're being overlooked at the moment. So that's why we focused on these areas. So between April and June this year, we brought together over 70 participants. So Kieron and I ran 3 workshops, didn't we, Kieron, with huge numbers of people you can see in the photographs here. And as you can see, they were from a wide variety of different places. We wanted to get as many different perspectives in the room, looking at this issue as we possibly could. We then followed up with an online workshop, and we also ran 2 surveys and had 10 interviews with people who couldn't make the workshop. So it was a really vast amount of people really co-producing, co-designing this vision and blueprint for how fee and justice could work better together. And there's going to be a couple of models I'm going to talk about in this presentation, some systems and futures thinking models that we used. So just very briefly, one of the models that we based this around was Bill Sharp's model called the 3 horizons. So just briefly, we looked at this horizon 1, which is the dominant sort of paradigm or the status quo. So that involved us getting people in the workshops to really think about what's happening now. So what's the current system with FE and justice? What's no longer working, and what are the barriers that are preventing change from happening? Why is this, dominant status quo so stuck? Why are we sort of stuck in this status quo? And then we got people to look at Horizon 2, which was about innovation, like spotting innovations, these emerging ideas. And there were some fantastic innovations that were happening, some with FE colleges and prison and probation, others with charities, others with universities. Lots of emerging ideas that were challenging the status quo. So these were like kind of pockets of the future that were happening in the current. So we looked at that. And then lastly, we looked at this Horizon 3, which is about imagining the future, this kind of not just tinkering around the edges, but a really quite radical shift and change. What does a transformed future look like to allow our imaginations to go there? Because sometimes when we're in that kind of day-to-day, and this was some of the feedback that Kieron and I got from the workshop, that people are kind of stuck in the day-to-day and firefighting and trying to make things work in a difficult system. And we just don't often have the spaces to really imagine and think about, if we could design this for ourselves, what would it look like? What's important? So part of these workshops were just giving us space to allow people to come together to do that imagination thinking. So, and the way that we did that to sort of get under the surface of these issues was through using creative methodologies. And I know there are a few people in the audience that work with creative methodologies. So we decided to use rich picturing. So we had 3 islands. We got people to imagine that they were either on Status Quo Island, or Innovation Island, or Transformative Future Island, and to really kind of use their creativity to imagine and think about what's really happening in those 3 horizons, those 3 spaces. And then we used some word clouds in one of the online workshops. So as you'll see, describing the kind of horizon one, so this status quo, what's happening now with FE and justice. So words came up like dire, disconnected, dysfunctional, undervalued, siloed, and leading to inequality. So, but also it's kind of hidden in there, you'll see these words sort of potential, opportunity, necessary. So people understanding that the system isn't working at the moment, but that there is potential here with potential connections between FE and justice. And one of the other creative methodologies that we used in the workshops was something called photo voice, which is where we ask people to work in pairs and go and take a photo with their mobile phone, just in the UCL building that we were at, or sometimes they went outdoors, but to represent in that photograph what they thought the status quo was at the moment with FE and justice through these kind of more abstract pictures. So you'll see here these kind of recurring themes that came up in some of these are just a sample of the pictures, but this idea about being inflexible, about one size fits all, this kind of grayness, this repetition, not being able to kind of push through, stop. So this idea of kind of not, people just saying no all the time, and the security camera, this idea of lack of trust of within the system, and that kind of drawn to the familiar, always doing the same things, not trying something new. So having kind of explored what the status quo looked like, well, how do we shift? That I talked earlier about feeling stuck, what keeps us stuck in place? And a really useful model, the second model that we brought in, is the 6 conditions of system change model. So you'll see there are kind of 3 layers. The top layer is the kind of structural changes that are needed to bring around system change. So that's sort of policies, practices, and resources and funding. The second layer is sort of getting deeper than that. It's about relational change. So those relationships and connections that we need to build, and power dynamics. Who's got a voice? Who's getting to make decisions? Who's got power in these scenarios? And then lastly, we're at the bottom and most fundamental of all for that kind of achieving that kind of transformative change is about mindsets and mental models. So what are people thinking and how's that influencing how they're behaving within the system? So we decided to, we took everything that had come out of the workshops and saw how they fitted into these 3 different layers: the structural barriers, the relational barriers, and the mindset barriers. And then on the reverse of that, all the enablers that come from those 3 as well. So I'm going to start with just going through some of the barriers that were identified. So firstly, the kind of structural barriers that were identified, and I've just talked about the centralized prison education contracts and the 3 providers. Again, there's a real lack of encouragement for developing those local partnerships with FE colleges. And you'll see there the kind of the post-it note with the kind of the measures and the ruler. There was a lot of talk about kind of narrow key performance indicators, narrow targets that are kind of measuring the wrong thing, and therefore a sense that providers were being kind of set up to fail, and there's this sort of one size fits all. So thinking about what are we measuring, what are the outcomes that we want to achieve. Obviously, policies about restricting digital access came up, and one of the quotes was, "What you learn in prison is so basic, it's no use in the real world." And I know from, I've worked a long time on issues around digital innovation within prison, that there are innovations out there. And we had people at the workshops who were bringing things like Coracle laptops and other things into the prison. So things have started to shift, but really it's not where it needs to be in order to really set people up for success in these sectors after release. Vetting and DBS processes, many of you will be really aware of the barriers that they produce, both for people working, for example, in sports and coaching is one example, but also going back into prisons and delivering sports or arts work within prisons. And as the HMIP report this week also highlighted again, was this real lack of using release on temporary license, to enable people to leave the prison on that kind of day release, that daily basis, to go out to college, to their local FE college, and access some of these higher level vocational qualifications. Some of the examples we came across were with some of the open prisons who were using that to go to their colleges, and some of them actually built a campus, in near some of the Kent prisons. So there are some innovations out there, but a lot more could be done in this space about really utilising release on temporary licence. We had a lot of charities and others working in this space, and I will hear from some of them later as speakers, but really talking about the barriers about short-term restrictive funding. So the idea of not being able to really embed these innovative projects that are going on because of that short-term restrictive funding. And the fact that prison work, and again, this came up in the HMIP report this week, that these kind of large contractors, the sort of prison industries, are just not providing the kind of level 3, those FE vocational qualifications, or providing opportunities for people to develop those either in prison or on release. And then finally, in terms of flows of resources, this idea of the lack of co-commission funding, so not bringing funding together, it being very restrictive, and not thinking imaginatively about how can access funding for this sort of work. And then secondly, we looked at the kind of relational barriers. So what gets in the way in terms of power and connections? And there was a real strong theme across all 3 workshops about this sense of process over people. So not putting people at the centre, sort of very much sort of box ticking approaches. Some examples of using people with lived experience, but very few in terms of really helping them to think about what transition into further education might look like and what support that they might need. Again, a real frustration about accountability bodies, and I talk about the HMIP report this week. This has not been the only one. It's something that is frequently mentioned by Ofsted, by the inspectorates, in terms of the lack of level 3, the lack of connections with FE colleges, and yet those accountability bodies seem to lack power to actually make any change happen. Something else that was brought up with this idea of sort of FE and justice institutions, and this siloing, because they speak kind of different languages. They've got kind of different priorities, different incentives. Someone said there's no incentive for FE colleges to think about widening participation for people with convictions. And so there's something, piece of work to be done there about, working across those different languages and priorities and incentivizing collaboration. And then there was a really practical barrier as well that, is about people being held far away from home, and therefore making it difficult when they're released from prison to get back into their local kind of FE college. So, and sort of finally, looking at those sort of post-it notes, there's this sort of also the mindset of real kind of risk-averse decision-making, this idea of kind of risk trumping everything, the kind of the great image of the foot, with the knee, with the knee-jerk reactions. So that kind of idea of saying no before actually exploring the options and how you might mitigate some risks fosters that kind of sense of mistrust and risk averseness. And then finally, this idea of, sort of the mindsets that people have got. So sort of the stereotypes that, reinforcing stigma, this idea of lack of aspiration, not seeing people's potential. And then if practitioners and others are saying that, then that actually, what we heard in the workshops was those sorts of that lack of aspiration actually then causing people in prison or on probation to have their own limiting beliefs that FE is not for someone like me. And then there's some mindsets around arts and sports in particular as sort of soft subjects, or not things that people can get work in, despite their proven impact, despite the fact that these industries actually do have a wide-ranging opportunities for people to work in them. And more broadly, a kind of a mindset as well that's sort of about undervaluing of lifelong learning, of people, adult education, people going back into learning as an adult. And again, as I talked about earlier, this idea of, the public and media narratives. So I know Erika's Flowers is going to talk more about this, but you'll see from this pictures, these sorts of themes drawn out in this first horizon of the status quo. But it wasn't all doom and gloom. We had loads of people in the workshops who were involved in the kind of innovation and bringing new thinking. So there was lots of sense of this idea that there was an innovative spirit within the sector, and that these innovations were like the sunshine, like the rays of sunshine that were kind of, despite the kind of doom and gloom, there were rays of sunshine, these pockets of good practice. But it just was that they were pockets, and it was like a patchwork, rather, a postcode lottery, rather than being something that was sort of embedded across the sector. So we started thinking about, well, what were the things that we could draw from all the examples of innovation across art, sports, and technology that we came across? What were the kind of key foundations and principles that really embedded that good practice and helped to shift them from being just pockets into something that was actually more stable? So from that kind of rickety bridge to the more stable bridge. And so we came up with 5 kind of key pillars. So the first one is around personalization. So a lot of the examples we got of innovation had flexibility built into that. It was tailored to different people's needs. So we saw some examples of short intensive courses, for example, for people who didn't want to study for a whole year. So they, made it short and intense. Some had wraparound accommodation and kind of other holistic support. Some were on the campus of the college, very few, but some of them. Some were outreach models that went to work placements where community unpaid work was happening, for example. And recognizing that not everyone wants to study in a classroom. There may be real kind of negative associations with classrooms and colleges. So, having those kind of outreach models also supported, not re-traumatizing people. So, yeah, personalized and flexible. Second pillar was about potential. So the innovations that we came across really strongly kind of put this idea of people's being aspirational for people, not having any idea of these glass ceilings of kind of whatever you dream and want to do. Let's try and make that possible. So this sort of culture of aspiration. Place was also really important. So lots of the innovations that people came to us with were place-based. So that's become a bit of a sort of a hot word at the moment, but I guess it means local partnerships. So, looking at regions, looking at local partnerships, bringing together fee colleges, prisons, probation, employers, charities, police and crime commissioners, looking at local authorities, really kind of looking in that place-based way to build trusted relationships, having forums that bring all these partners together to think about what are the local skills gaps, to co-commission, bring all those funding in from those different streams together. So place was really important. Positivity as well, this idea of the people that we met them in the workshops, and you'll meet some of them on the call today, really passionate individuals with a can-do mindset, so driving this kind of change, really committed to inclusion, committed to widening participation, finding creative solutions where there's a barrier put in place, trying to kind of mitigate any risks or any challenges through kind of creative solutions. However, as one person said in the workshop, people that are doing fantastic stuff against the odds isn't sustainable long term. We need to kind of get this kind of positivity, this drive, this passion to more people than just those one-off people. And then lastly, this idea of partnerships being really important. So kind of bringing charities in that often provide that kind of being a broker, but also involving people with lived experience, playing a central role for kind of making these partnerships work and build trusted partnerships. And not to forget as well, kind of academic partners, really important. We had a few academics join us who were involved in evaluating these innovations, sharing the good practice, getting the learning from them. So partnerships with universities to evaluate, also really important. And so then we started the imagination. Well, what would this transformative future with fee and justice look like if we could design, if we can co-design it? And so we had words like, collaborative, community-based, cooperative, empowering, equitable, engaging. So really sort of positive words, and we use the photo voice again to kind of try and get these concepts for people. So you can see here the kind of the green, the go, people saying yes. We've got the kind of the wires showing kind of flexibility, that people are able to kind of flex with what people actually need. We've got the kind of the graffiti art showing that it's actually cool and colorful and brighten something up. This idea of working together. And someone said the spirit, it would be just joyful, if the transformative future happened. So we kind of use some of these methods to sort of really get a sense of what people want the future to look like. And then again, we use these three layers of the structural, of the relational, of the mindsets to think, well, what are the enablers? How do we make this happen? How do we move these, kind of disruptive individual innovations? How do we embed that to make it this transformative future? So we started looking at the structural to start with. So things like flexible and co-produced contracts, things like personalized programs. We think that a national FE widening participation strategy would really help to kind of start to think about, actually, how can we have a program that almost takes for granted that there will be partnerships between a local prison and their local FE college, between a probation office and their local FE college, and really getting FE involved in this idea of widening participation, including people with convictions, and what that might look like. And that would include vetting processes, again, that are kind of nuanced, that aren't just these blanket bans, but actually, look way up risk, but also look at where people are at. If people are wanting to study at FE college, is looking at them on an individual basis. And there's a lot to learn here as well from the partnerships between prisons and universities. I've been involved a lot over the years with that piece of work, and I know Unlock have done a lot of work around supporting universities with their admissions processes. So I think there's a lot we can learn from FE into this idea of widening participation and widening access for FE as well. And again, another big one, cross-departmental collaboration, this idea of actually the Ministry of Justice working alongside the Department for Work and Pensions, Department for Education, Department of Health, even around sports and arts for health, bringing these different departments together. We've got a Department of Government at the moment that talks about mission-led approaches, this idea of working across different departments. And this is a perfect example of where that sort of working can happen at that national level, but also at kind of local level that I talked about. And absolutely, I think coming back to this idea of community service, if we're going to have more people not being on short sentences in prison, more people doing community sentences, doing unpaid work, how can we improve that 1 in 10 people that are not getting access to that education, training and employment? So kind of really, clearly linking community service with FE qualifications has got massive potential. And providing that kind of wraparound support for people to enable them to access college, and whether that might be support from counselling, support with accessing housing, all those sort of wraparound things that people need to not just access FE but to thrive when they're there. Other things, as I talked about, so flexible funding, co-commissioning. Really interesting, an idea came up about these personalized learning budgets for people on probation or leaving prison, and also linking it to social prescribing, because there was also that sense of, yes, it helps you to get employment, but the arts, the sports in particular, things that also help health and well-being. So how can we look really holistically at supporting arts and sports as part of that kind of maybe broader social prescribing model for people to go to FE, and the mental health benefits of being involved in education. So and then lastly, this idea of the sort of mindset. So again, it's this sort of positive can-do culture, the kind of can I, yes we can, sort of in those post-it notes, this mindset shift, moving away from kind of stereotypes and stigma to actually really looking on an individual basis, for example, with admissions. And when thinking about arts and sports, and fair chance hiring practices. So there's a lot that can be done in terms of thinking about those kind of changing of mindsets where there are risks, and there are, and I think, the participants are really aware that this isn't easy. It's not just, often saying yes immediately, but getting to yes? What are the mitigations we can put in place? How can we work? How can we be flexible to, if someone wants to engage in further education, how can we make that possible? And then, yeah, Erika will talk through, the beautiful design that she did of the transformed future. So yeah, that's a real kind of whistle stop tour, but hopefully you'll see from this system map, it brings together these three different horizons. It brings together the status quo that we're currently in, the kind of the sunshine of the different innovations that are happening, and then the transformed future. And I really want to say a massive thank you to everybody who got involved in this project. Thank you for the beautiful illustrations, and we hope that this is a first step, and we'd really like a first step of actually bringing together a kind of a working group to take this forward. So if anyone's who's watching this is keen to get involved in that, please do let us know. We need to build a movement around this, bringing lots of different people together to help ensure that this imagined future becomes reality. Thank you for listening.
Well, thank you, Nina. Great presentation. Lots of appreciation going across the screen. Can we stop sharing now, Nina? Yeah, brilliant. Oh, my camera's off. I'd now like to introduce you to Kieron, who's going to lead the discussion. Oh, lots of appreciation there, Nina. To lead the discussion between some people who took part of it, to see what they took away from the event. So over to you, Kieron. I'm going to switch my mic off now.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone can hear me. I'm Kieron Bryan. I help Nina run the workshops. And I just wanted to give a quick talk about the whole project from my experience and from a lived experience perspective. So in terms of the subjects that we chose, art, sports, and the digital industries, there is a lot of opportunity to grow them in prison and outside of prison in terms of just not the highlights. So with art, prisoners are thinking, for example, you just have to be an artist, a Van Gogh, for example, and that's the only avenue that you can go in art, but they love art. The same as sports, they think they might have to be a big sports star, footballer, for example, but there's a lot of different avenues they can take in sport that are not available to them whilst they're in prison, because their prison system is obviously focusing on more tangible futures, as these particular sectors are looked as soft industries, like what Nina said, i.e. they're not leading to employment. But the thing with that is that even with the other hard industries, for lack of a better word, like building, all of that kind of stuff, you're in a lottery system. Within what prison you're in, what do they offer that is not level 2 and less English maths, for example? So you have a big gap there where you could do your level 1 English, maths, etc. And then depending on what you're interested in, there would be no gap to get you to the university level. So level 3 and the college level. In terms of the three horizons that we used, looking at the problem, the status quo, and the rich picturing, and the best case scenarios, the transformative area that we want to end up in. I think that was good at setting the foundation of the barriers that we're facing at the moment, as well as moving on to looking at the things that some of the participants were involved in terms of the innovations that are going on at the moment and how we can look to extend them. I think the rich picturing and the photo voice was very informative, because it gave a essence of what everyone was feeling about the system. And I was surprised to learn that as a serving prisoner and looking at the system from the inside out, and then being a part of this group and looking at the system from the outside in, I was surprised that the problems were the same and the perspectives were the same in terms of security being an issue, even though it's not common sense, in terms of the lottery ticket, in terms of the problems with funding, and that feeling that rehabilitation is not the primary goal of incarcerating people. So that was very surprising. The issues that stood out for me was that people get into this sector very passionate about trying to help prison leavers in particular, and they end up in a position where their hands are tied and they end up just going with the flow and ticking boxes and end up losing that drive, losing that passion, and losing the will or the ability to not thinking that anything can change, basically. So just thinking, you know what, it's gonna be like this, so there's no point, and kind of taking a step back. So yeah, so that is my sum of the whole project. I'd like to say thank you, Nina, for the opportunity, and everyone else involved in the project. I think we're gonna move on to Erika now to give a talk about the images that she created, which were brilliant.
Do you want me to share screen? Hello, everybody.
Happy for you to do that, but I've got it on if you want. You can.
No, I've got them lined up. It's okay.
Okay, lovely.
Just got to remember which buttons to press. Oh, send request.
Oh, sorry.
Request has been sent.
And it's been accepted.
Okay. Right, let's see if it works this time. Share. Let's share.
Erika, are you from It's Not Your Birthday at Feltham?
I was.
I thought so. Recognised you.
There you go. How's that? Is that not too bad? Can you see yourselves in that, or can you just see the picture?
You've got the
picture.
Allow that.
That's it.
That better?
Yeah.
What's going on with this? Okay, hopefully that's clear. Okay, so this is the first part of the drawing, which is HMP no. So we'll just go through each part separately. I wonder if we can go. No, it doesn't let me go in a bit. So we have the multiple surveillance going on here, and the whole place is just littered with random barriers because everything's just so difficult to do anything. And we've got the one size fits all shed, in that all convictions are treated in the same way pretty much. So there's no sort of nuance to maybe lesser offences, and you're marked for life with those offences. We've got the fact that there's so many official reports telling the authorities how to make things better, and they just don't get implemented. And the fact that the current system has just been stuck together with sticky plasters. And we've got as far as the colleges are concerned, we've just got either directions to nowhere or the Mission Impossible College, which has got a bin full of complaints stuffed in there, which is completely overflowing. And there's also for the families, there's no help. There's for the people that are inquiring, there's really no help in the transition between prison and coming out, or even when you're in prison. So difficult. And the other issues raised with it, we have that people that come up with such amazing ideas and they go into the prisons and they really work. They apply for funding and it's either no or not enough to actually deliver what you need to deliver. And then contracts get difficult. And I haven't been involved in that side personally, but I'm sure it's not easy. And I also wanted to raise that, as far as the one size fits all, just when everything's more difficult when you leave prison. So for instance, you've got the do you have a conviction tick box type thing, which can affect your employment, and it seriously affects your insurance, because insurance seems to be able to charge premiums to people who've got convictions, whatever their conviction is. So the private sector is also benefiting from people with convictions. So the system is just set up for everybody to fail. So maybe then we'll move on to number 2, where we have the bridge of change, the innovation and inspiration bridge of change. So currently you're just ejected from prison, which is why we have, I think it's called a trebuchet or something, I can't remember. But anyway, catapulted back into the real world with not really much prospect of a soft landing. And also into a society that is sort of, the media and everything is always, it's all lined up to sort of continually persecute you. You've got a label now. You're convicted. You are a criminal for the rest of your life. And that sort of risk-averse thing of, oh, you've ticked that box, we can't employ you type of thing. It needs to change, that change of mindset into actually, no, there's real people here. They've just had difficult, challenging lives and got mixed up in stuff. They need help. So let's help them and let's guide them into a future that benefits everybody, and society. And then we have the future, where the future people say yes, which is why we have a big yes statue. And everybody's got meaningful employment. There's lots of well-being with horticulture and sports and arts, and there's all the services are actually linked together, and they're asking for ideas from the public, that they want ideas from people, and that they're happy to be able to put it in a place where they can be implemented, and that people are encouraged, and the reports that the government pays millions of pounds to produce are actually implemented, rather than just put on a shelf and referred to in everybody else's reports. And then we've got that much more integrated within society, rather than society being sort of told, oh, look, they're criminal, they've messed up, that's them for life. Encouraging them to go to college and having the provision within the community to provide that, and the spaces and the facilities that they need to actually improve. And it's not just people that have been through prison. People experience similar conditions in life, so they might be in danger of going into the criminal justice, and this is a way for them not going there in the first place. So that's a whole society new picture that we are trying to get towards. So there you go. I shall stop sharing now we've been through them. I'm sure I've missed little bits of the detail, but I've done my best. So there we go. So thank you, everybody.
Kieron, over to you. Kieron, are you going to introduce our next speaker? You're on mute.
Sure.
Is Jazz the next speaker?
No. Well, we can do it in any order, Kieron, but I think Carlotta is on a bit of a time sensitive. So can we go to Carlotta next?
Okay, then sorry, go to Carlotta.
That's cool.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, good to go.
Off you go, Carlotta. Sorry.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Just checking. Yes, sorry, I'm away and I'm gonna have to go after this, but really good to read the report, and thank you for sharing it with me so I could respond to it a bit early. I was just writing out some responses in case I had to go and send it to you. So it was impressive, but it often feels like with things like this that things never change, you know, that you were shouting into the echo chamber, all the points such as, you know, the lack of joined up thinking, you know, it's been highlighted again and again and again. And, you know, because there's no funding, obviously these things can't get acted on. The prison I worked in most recently, Brixton Prison, you know, they got hauled up in their Ofsted report that there was a lack of provision in the arts and that they were really missing out. But, you know, their money isn't there to employ the arts charities. You know, we've got all these great ideas and all these things ready to go, but unless we can enact it through the funding, it just can't happen. So, I mean, I know that's a bit doom and gloom, but I just really hope that some of this sticks and some of this makes it to policy level. But as soon as, you know, the more groups like this there are, then the more working groups that we can put together, then, you know, surely we can affect change somehow. In terms of arts, it's almost like, and you do pick up on this in your reporting, that we need a new language to describe the arts. That, you know, art, people think of just drawing and painting and sort of I don't know, GCSE art or something, but there's so many avenues in the creative industries that need to be talked about so much more, you know, writing, shifting narratives, social prescribing, health and well-being that comes through craft and creating and making things, designing things, that the word the arts doesn't really cover it, you know, theatre and drama and confidence raising and all these things that come through these avenues, which and I think, you know, when charities like Stretch or like drama charities or all these charities that do such good work in prisons, and there's these great examples of all these charities working well, when they work well, and they the really good example, there needs to be like clear entry level education that they can hook onto these charities, you know. And you do say that, I know, you know, but you know, you have to go through the maths and English and basic skills, and then you get on a different level. And I think there's a lack of that entry level further education in the arts. So, I don't know if that's the role for the college or a role for the prison education provider to make those proper educational links, a bit like Open Book do with their extended project qualification, the EPQ. But I think there's room for more entry-level qualifications. And, you know I used to deliver arts awards. They're only for under 25s, but, you know, bridging qualifications that would then lead into further education. And with the lived experience, similarly, I think, you know, I think as working groups for people with lived experience, that we could all sort of talk about our experiences in and out of education and the prison, and we could share ideas, you know, as to how we can use the lived experience. I think there's so many people now, and, you know, Kieron and lots of people involved in your project who are really valuable offering their lived experience. So I think within every prison there could be people coming back in and serving as proper examples for the prisoners that are in the prison at the moment. So we could have, there's millions of artists who have lived experience and writers and all sorts of creatives, and maybe every prison or every FE college should have a working group of people with lived experience. But yeah, you know, just got to keep pushing, and things like this will do that. Is that good?
Oh, that was perfect. Thank you for that. Really appreciate that. I think, Jazz, are you ready to go next, Jazz?
I can certainly go next.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Firstly, thank you to Nina and the team and all the stakeholders involved. It's been a joy to be part of this. I want everyone just to imagine for a second leaving prison right now. So you're going through a prison gate. You've got your little life belongings on your back, and you're walking out, and you're walking into a world that's not just digitally dominated, but AI dominated. And you go and see your probation officer, They then let you go and they go, right, you better get a job. So how are you going to apply for a job? How are you going to book a doctor's appointment? Or even buy a ticket to an event or something? It's all done online now. I spent 3 years in prison from 2019 to 2022 when I was released into the community on probation. And in the 3 years which straddled the pandemic, I went in paying cash for some of the stuff that I used to buy. And now I just wave this around and money evaporates from my account. For many prison leavers, just paying for their weekly shopping is an impossible task. When they get to the self-checkout, they don't know what to do. So years of digital disconnection means what to most of us that we see as a simple task or daily action seems like a foreign world for many people that are leaving prison. So in a society that runs on technology, digital exclusion is today a modern day isolation. That's why further education has a vital role, if not a pivotal role, not just in teaching skills, but in rebuilding the confidence, the dignity of those that are incarcerated to provide the opportunity for them to live meaningful, purposeful lives. But digital fluency is more than just knowing how to use a computer or open a smartphone. It's about confidence, it's about adaptability and the safe participation in the digital world, from filling out online forms to using Microsoft Teams as we're doing right now, or managing finances. Without these skills, people can't access universal credit, housing, healthcare, the simplicities of their tributaries that will support their life. They'll struggle to find or sustain employment in a digital world. Last year, I was invited to the International Broadcasting Convention in Amsterdam to speak as one of the keynotes, and of the 5 keynotes, not one of us mentioned AI. This year, when I returned as a keynote, out of the 5 keynotes, 3 were dominated by AI. That's how quickly technology moves. And if we don't support these individuals, these returning citizens that come out of prison, what are we doing? We're not allowing them to reintegrate. We're almost diverting and deflecting them back into their old patterns, and we'll be contributing not vicariously, but directly to the reoffending rates. So supporting digital fluency is not just an educational goal. It's social justice, and it's an economic necessity. There are great examples across the UK. We've got the essential digital skills qualifications inside prisons, but sometimes we make it hard to reach those that are hard to reach. And that's where FE can play a role. The last 2 visits I visited was Millsyke up in York, which is the most modern prison, very digitally fluent and inclusive. And then the last one I went to was on Monday, was HMP Pentonville, where I served some time. But even in that Victorian cathedral of incarceration, they're retrofitting connectivity. So it can be done, there is a way. And what we need to do is get the FE colleges to reach into those prisons, into those prison cells, to make it normal for us to be looking at digital as a career pathway. When we think of the future, digital is what's going to dominate most of the career opportunities. And what we need to see is more collaboration between the prisons, the FE colleges, but also the employment world. So there is that holy trinity that actually can reach into those people that are lost in their own darkness in prison cells to say, actually, there is a bright future ahead of you. Now, there is progress, but there's also significant challenges. Yeah, access to equipment and devices, especially on release. I was speaking with somebody earlier this week about companies that redistribute some of their 2-year-old laptops that are worth £2,000. So again, the community around us, the employers, the colleges, they can look at and reach out and say, actually, why don't we use this as a social value ticket? Let's start redistributing some of this equipment back into prisons. We know there's a funding issue in prisons. I do often find that a huge oxymoron. In an industry that turns over $30 trillion globally, I always wonder why they're always struggling for money. But continuity, the skills gained inside often vanish due to weak post-release support. So I know that when I was on probation, nobody offered me a digital course. Nobody said to me, actually, do you need any enhancements on your digital literacy? But it's also about giving people that confidence. You know, sometimes people feel embarrassed that they can't use something, you know, and in prison, you know, you have to respect your ego is your amigo in some cases, where you don't want to disclose you've got a weakness or a vulnerability. That's a sign that you often shield away or mask. But training has to always connect to real world job demands. We know that prison does very well, and Kieron mentioned it, it does very well in those hard hat, high vis, heavy shoe jobs. Yeah, you know, there's almost a pipeline that we can get people onto construction sites, but not everybody wants to work on a construction site. The further education providers can change this narrative by making digital inclusion part of the rehabilitation and not as an afterthought. And here are my sort of 5 recommendations after reading the report. Let's start creating seamless pathways. Let's build programs from custody to community. Colleges are a huge part of the community. So further education colleges should partner with prison education teams so learners can continue their digital development immediately after release on the same platform with the same tutor and the same momentum. Deliver real-world digital skills. Offer essential digital skills qualifications, the EDSQs, alongside practical modules. Applying for jobs, using online banking, or managing digital safety, because digital fluency should be taught as a life skill, not as a technical one. Provide access to devices and connectivity. Collaborate with those tech firms and the charities to loan or gift refurbished devices and subsidize data plans. Without equipment, even the best teaching becomes irrelevant. And let's embed digital into all learning. Make digital skills part of every subject, from construction, catering, or admin. Let's start showing how technology enhances employability in every field. This helps normalize digital use and reduces the fear of using that technology. And let's invest in lived experience mentoring and confidence building. Pair prison leavers with digital mentors or peer tutors who have lived experience, who are those beacons before them, so that we can actually lay a footpath that becomes a well-trodden path in the future. Because confidence and mindset are as important as the technical skill, especially for those who've been excluded from society for years. Why should we do it? By supporting digital fluency, further education providers can reduce digital poverty and reoffending, improve employment and social reintegration outcomes, so that we can contribute to the ESG, the DEI, and the social mobility goals every organisation has. Because every learner who gains digital confidence moves one step closer to independence and one step further from reoffending. So in short, digital fluency is actually freedom. Further education can be the bridge between isolation and inclusion, helping prison leavers not just to re-enter society, but thrive within it. So let's all collectively ensure that when someone walks out of prison, they're not walking into a digital prison outside of those walls and high fences.
Jess, that was absolutely brilliant and absolutely moving. Well done with that delivery. Next we've got Eddie, Playfair, the Association of Colleges. Oh, Eddie, basically. Eddie, are
Thank
you
you.
ready?
Yes, thanks very much. Hi everyone. I'm still processing all the things I've heard. So this is a bit of a kind of off the cuff response to the document and to the discussion today. I mean, first of all, congratulations on a brilliant report. I mean, it really is. I think it moves us a long way forward, and thank you to all the partners involved. And it's nice to see college case studies showcased in here, and what Nina called the pockets of the future within status quo Ireland. But obviously that's not enough, is it? As I think we're all agreeing, we need a whole sector approach, a whole system approach. And I'm kind of beginning to reflect on how AOC could help to imagine a better system. I think it's worth saying that, I mean, speaking personally, I would support all aspects of the vision that Nina set out, the vision on page 4 of the report. We need something to be system-wide, sustainable, flexible, co-produced, with transparent, fair, contextual processes. But as somebody was saying earlier, these are things we've been hoping for a long time. It's about how we get there. So I guess just a few thoughts about what's in the report and what we've been discussing. One is to make sure we keep routes and curriculum options as open as possible, and not make too many assumptions about what people want. If we genuinely want to be co-producing, we need to listen to people in the moment as to what they want and what they need. I mean, some learners will be on a very focused, very linear pathway entry, level 1, level 2, level 3, etc., in one route, because they're very determined and clear about where they're going, and that's fine. And the system is not bad at doing that. But for a lot of learners, it's going to be about small incremental steps, zigzag pathways, false starts, or so-called false starts, which actually may actually be very constructive and positive. And some of the sort of tangential things that this kind of very instrumental approach that we have in the system. I'm not just talking about people in the criminal justice system, but in education generally, tends to ignore the kind of things on the side which can become very important. So I'm thinking, confidence building, the confidence you gain from doing a poetry workshop or a creative writing program can be the confidence that you need to embark on your training program for hair and beauty or construction. And the two things don't, in our current system, the two things don't are not seen as connected. And the need for things like, I was reading, I'm sure many of you read a piece in the paper the other day about philosophy in prisons, which is, there's a fantastic practice of philosophy in prisons, which again sounds a bit counterintuitive, but it's not at all, really. And economic literacy, political literacy, digital literacy. Jazz was talking about digital literacy. All these things may not be on the kind of linear path that people design for you, but in the moment they are the right thing to build your to kind of build your pathway. The other thing is employment. There's a lot of emphasis on employment. Absolutely right. It's such a high priority, isn't it, for people, access to employment. And it's very motivating, and it can be very educationally motivating. But it doesn't mean that that's got to be the only priority. And so we need occupational courses, but we also need some of these other programs that are not the obvious. They're not obviously vocational. And I think learners need a choice. Like all learners, learners who have experience of the criminal justice system need a choice across the full range. So I understand the points about visual and performing arts, sports, and digital. And I would say colleges are actually strong in these areas, and they are valued by colleges don't, they're not overlooked at all. If they are overlooked in the system, it's certainly not FE colleges that are overlooking them. They are key parts of the FE offer. So in terms of what do we do next? Well, how do we create this better future? I guess we need a new model, a new funding and accountability model, which incentivizes inclusivity and accessibility rather than just outcomes. I'm not speaking against outcomes, but we have to define a kind of social value, community benefit. We talk a lot about social value and colleges as anchor institutions. Do we really mean it? Does that reach far enough into our communities? Does it include people who are in custody, or people who are coming out of custody or on license? So yes, we're a sector that's about individual opportunity and employability and so on, but also we need to be about social value and community benefit. But the system, the funding system, has to incentivize that, has to recognize that. So we need to redefine success. We also need to think about personalization, tailoring. There's a whole tradition in FE around SEND learners of RAPA, recognizing and recording progress and achievement. Maybe that sort of approach could be applied more widely to learners who are not necessarily SEND, but who need tailored programs. And just think about the journey. Think about the transition from custody via license and probation to non-custodial, and just think about that whole journey, and who is supporting people. Who's the trusted professional that's supporting people through that, rather than people being passed from pillar to post. So, and there was one example. There was some great case studies in here. I'm so glad to see colleges as part of that. But there was one recent example, which is quite a small thing, but I think quite significant, which was London colleges working with the Youth Justice Service in London to develop a protocol for working together. That's a small thing, but it's a really it's actually a step forward for the system. And I suppose I'm beginning to think, well, how could we do that nationally? How do we How do we replicate that sort of approach nationally so that every college feels part of this, not just the very, very small number of colleges who have prison education contracts, with all the difficulties that has. So I was quite taken by. I haven't heard the phrase. Jazz used the phrase "cathedrals of incarceration," and I thought, oh my goodness, that's I had this vision of the kind of these kind of this carceral model. And I suppose we see the college sector as a kind of as sites of flourishing sites where you build that better future. So how do we turn the system from being a kind of carceral model to being a kind of opportunity, imagining the future kind of model? Because there's so much potential, so much you know, if we waste human potential, then we're all the losers, aren't we? We it's bad for everyone, for society, for those people, but for all of us. So I suppose I'm just thinking, I haven't got an answer for you today, but I'm just thinking on behalf of AOC whether we can imagine a way of getting some kind of whole sector engagement. We represent most of FE, so we're obviously, we should obviously be able to broker that and convene that, but also we depend on our members' enthusiasm and commitment to do all this work. We can't make people do things, but we can help to convene and enthuse and engage people. So I suppose I'm committing to that today. You can quote me on that, but it's not something that AOC on its own can do. Thank you.
That was absolutely brilliant, Eddie. I love the zigzag point you made and about the counterintuitive of different subjects like philosophy. I've done a philosophy course in Whitemore, and it was even intuitive from my perspective. I'm thinking, why are they doing philosophy? No one's going to do that. But I went and done it because I thought that's the most challenging thing that I can see. And I learned about Immanuel Kant and language, and it was paradigm shifting. So, and it did build my confidence to do other things. Yeah, so you're completely right about that. Can Reshma from the
I
Ministry
don't know if
of
we've got
Justice?
Lindsey as well, Kieron.
Okay, should we
It
go
might be good
straight
to
to
end on
Lindsey?
the kind of Reshma, maybe.
Okay. Okay, then we'll
To
go
go.
to Lindsey Middleton next. Is that
Oh.
okay?
Lindsey, are you having problems? Oh.
You're on mute, Lindsey. I don't know if you can come off mute. It's not allowing you to. Oh no.
Let's
Yes,
see.
I
Ah,
apologise.
Okay,
I'm
brilliant.
so sorry, everybody. I'm having serious technical issues. I'm just trying to bring up my notes, but they disappeared. So this is off the cuff, guys. So I apologise. I'm horrified. Thank you, firstly, Anita, Nina, Kieron, Erika, for that amazing visual. You brought it to life in a really, really very clever way. I loved that. So I hope it makes sense, guys. So I'm Lindsey Middleton. I'm the co-founder of the 180 Project. We are, I suppose, we fit in the sport for good, really, the health and wellbeing sphere. And we run a resettlement program at HMP Lancaster Farms. You would spend 6 months with us prior to release every day, or we all live on the same wing. I say week because I feel like I live there. And then on release, you're part of our community program. So we have a community program about 30 minutes away from the prison. We have housing, and we provide this wraparound therapeutic support for men leaving prison into the community. And it's all held together through movement, functional fitness, CrossFit. And that's how we build relationships. That's how it starts in the gym, basically. And then there's wraparound therapeutic resettlement activities in the prison. But everybody does live together, so people do learn how to live as part of a community with all the challenges that brings on the wing. We have a therapist and we have resettlement community link workers as well. So that's what it kind of visually looks like. So we are very invested in that supportive journey on the out. My own personal experience was I started further education when I was in my 3rd drug and alcohol rehab in the 90s. And I won't be sat here today if I hadn't done that. But it was a really, really challenging journey, just going into further education with all the voices in my head, all the negative voices, and all the mental health issues I had. I needed a lot of support around me to just keep pushing forward. It was really hard, and I see that a lot with the people that we support. There's a lot of family, relational issues that impact on people turning up. Obviously, if people struggle with mental health issues, that again, that's really hard, turning up when you feel awful, when you feel like a failure, walking into an arena where you think everybody else is successful is horrible. So we exist basically to walk with each person holistically. And when we say holistically, it is holistic, to ensure that they thrive. And people are with us in the housing for up to 2 years, but they stay in our community like forever. We're a forever community. This is hard work without my notes, because I did bullet point everything on the report because the report was brilliant. Personally and professionally, the event that you ran was really, really good for me and for us as an organisation, because we sit in the innovation disruptor kind of place, and that is really lonely at times. You can feel really unsupported because you are keeping your eye on the future, that transformative future of hope, whilst, frontline delivery, and that's hard. It's very emotionally draining, isn't it? Seeing how the system just kind of doesn't create opportunities, and you see people wanting to change and yet not being able to. So as an organisation that's really invested in that transformative change, we need spaces like this. We really need spaces like this, because it gives us the hope that we then in turn give, the people we deal with, people we try and help, hope. It's transferable. But like other people have said, what next? I think for me, it's the evidence. It's the evidence that further education impacts. I mean, I know I've saved the taxpayer an awful lot of money by changing my ways. And I don't know whether being noisy is helpful. Sometimes it has been for us, sometimes it hasn't. I think, I always felt like a groundswell would impact, and then there would be a meeting in the middle, top down, bottom up. I don't know. But I think we need to provide some form of evidence of what these pockets of good practice are doing, because that was the other thing. It was exciting to see. I know Jeff's on, who does prison yoga. There's people on here who are doing amazing things. So it is happening. But the funding is an issue. We've stayed independently funded in order to stay nimble and flexible. So we've never gone for MOJ monies. And that's the only thing that's kept us going for 4 years. So I really welcome the idea, of a working group, and I'd love to be part of that, and whatever I can do to kind of help, make change happen, I'm all in. So that was really ad lib. I'm so sorry. Thanks for listening, guys.
Thank you for that, Lindsey. That was brilliant. Had some technical issues getting back on there. Okay, so we're gonna end with Reshma. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely fine. Thanks, Kieron. Hi, everyone. Lovely to meet you. So I work for the MOJ. I'm a senior policy advisor in the prison education team. I really wish I could have had all my colleagues join today, actually, because it's really, really valuable what you all had to say, every single one of you. So thank you for that. I've taken loads of notes, and hopefully we'll be in touch with a lot of you. And thank you to Nina and team for organising these sessions. They were excellent. We took lots and lots away from there. My background is an employment background, actually, and I've volunteered in prisons for over 24 years. So I kind of get to be in that special place of being able to see what's actually going on in prison, but also what we can do in the policy space as well. It's a really difficult marriage, shall we say, at times. So HMP Feltham is my base. So I've worked with lots of men there, and I see the transformative power of education, and I know the value of all the things that you guys are doing is so important. Really interested, Jazz, in the digital literacy stuff as well. For us, I guess, what coming away from the sessions, what were the takeaways that we had? Well, it's this one size fits all thing that really grates on me the most, if I can be honest. It's trying to find something where we can offer people a second chance, or a chance to kind of imagine a different future at any stage in anyone's sentence. I think that's the key thing, because it's very different. Someone's journey from a kind of long sentence to a remand sentence, it's so different, and we can't kind of do what we're doing right now. So we recognize that. That's the first thing I wanted to say. Secondly, the kind of really complexity of prison education kind of, it sits at the intersection of like justice, rehabilitation, and community integration. It's making that more seamless, highlighting the positive effects that it has on people's mental health, their well-being, their self-esteem. All of these things are so important and so undervalued. They're all really big factors that contribute to a safe and stable prison, because actually the reality is, if we don't have a safe and stable prison, you can forget about education. It's the first thing that goes. And me kind of trying to explain this when I got to the MOJ is the biggest thing, is trying to get that across. It's like, we're not going to do anything if it's not going to be safe and stable. And I think the arts and all of the stuff that we've discussed today has a huge role in that. It's not just an enrichment thing. There is a career at the end of it. So I think for us, it's like revisiting systems and structures and looking at how are we unintentionally holding people back. And I remember talking to Kieron and listening to what he was saying at one of his sessions and thinking, oh my God, he had to do X, Y, and Z, overcome all these barriers himself before he could get to the point where he wanted to get to. And that was with a lot of help from people within the prison too. So thinking of that in reality, that's a lot of onus on a prisoner themselves. And I feel that the reality is, and this is from my personal opinion, the reality is that a lot of people in prison may not have that same drive or confidence, shall we say, as Kieron did. So I think that's something we really need to look at and really need to lean into a little bit more with what we're providing at the moment, as well as broadening the curriculum that we have right now. I think the range of activities are very focused on the traditional sort of qualifications, and I know construction was mentioned here before and all the rest of that. So it's kind of like recognizing these different forms of progress and the potential that they have as well. And I think the only way to do that, and this is my main takeaway, is strengthening collaboration. And that's not only with you guys, and obviously welcome this working group, because I think that will be a game changer for us here in moving some of this work forward, but also in the kind of siloed sense that we sometimes work in government. So like, okay, fine, there's DWP and DFE, but kind of making that a broader thing. It's not just those departments. We need to kind of really broaden our approach and be a little bit more ambitious. I feel that that's what's lacking. So those are my kind of main takeaways. And then ultimately keeping the people that we're making the policy for at the heart of what we're trying to do, because it's all about that. It's that learning in custody, it's that aspiration, it's being able to continue the journey upon release, just keeping them at the heart of what we need, what we're doing here. So I think I would really welcome to be part of the working group and, you know, work with you guys further. On a side note, how the workshops were delivered, we actually stole your Transformation Island piece. We thought it was amazing, and we actually used it ourselves in our own kind of workshops within our own team. So we absolutely loved it. So thank you so much. That's something that I actually took away and reused. So that's the biggest compliment I can give you on your workshops. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time, and I hope that's been okay.
Oh, thank you for that, Reshma. That was beautiful. And I'll hand over to Nino or Anita to close up.
Yeah, I'm a bad chair. we've managed to come up to the end of the session and not had any proper discussion. But I think we've had such wonderful, wonderful speakers that I couldn't bear to butt in and stop anybody. So, oh, you all right, Kieron? Yeah, so I will actually like to bring this session to a close, I think, because it's been an hour and a half. It's been a long time for people to concentrate. A huge thank you for you all for coming, and for those of you that spoke, thank you so much. There's so much that we will take away. The working group seems to be getting a lot of love from around the virtual room. We'll have to think about how we work to take that forward. And I would like to say, as I said in the chat, we will put the report and the event slides across to you all in an email, and thank you for coming. And then maybe we can start thinking about how we can take some of these ideas forward as a group. So it's a thank you from me at Justice Futures and the whole team from UCL. And especially I want to say thank you again to Nina for all this lovely hard work and the brilliant report that she put together in the end. So hopefully we'll see you again at one of either Justice Futures event or something with UCL or the wider team. Thank you again and goodbye.